Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football late Wednesday night in just some massive news for the Ohio State fans coming out of the transfer portal. Former North Carolina edge rusher Beau Atkinson committing to Ohio State. Really, three reasons why I think this is massive for Ohio State. Number one, and I've been very vocal really since Beau Atkinson entered his name into the transfer portal. In my opinion, he was the best pure football player that was available in the spring portal window. So you're getting a really good football player. Number two, you're getting a really good football player at a position that I think was a concern for a lot of Ohio State fans heading into 2025, where you look at Ohio State coming off the national championship year, they're running it back with a lot of talent. And I think for the Ohio State fans who follow this program pretty damn closely and kind of understand where the roster, where the depth chart sits, the biggest concern for a lot of Ohio State fans was, are we going to be as dominant on the defensive line as we were in the 2024 year? And you make no mistake about it, the national media, they like to talk about a guy like Jeremiah Smith and Will Howard and Quinshon Judkins, and look, rightfully so. Like all really, really good football players. In my opinion, the biggest reason Ohio State won the national championship in the 2024 season was how dominant that defensive line was. They were number one in the country in sack percentage. They sacked the quarterback 10.7% of dropbacks in the 2024 year. I mean, we were talking about elite numbers. That was number one in the country. Second, they were really good against the run. Only 2.7 yards per carry allowed. That was number two in the country. You look at one of, if not the most, the biggest, you might say, driving factor of Ohio State being as dominant as they were in the college football playoffs last year. To me, it started with having an entire NFL defensive line. Now, with all those guys going to the NFL draft, we were excited about guys like Kenyatta Jackson. We're excited about guys like Caden Curry. Can we be as dominant as we were in 2024? Beau Atkinson is going to come in and really enhance what Ohio State can do in the trenches on the defensive line. So number two, it was a position of a little bit concern for Ohio State fans. And then lastly, like this kid fits what Ohio State is looking for at that edge position, which I think is a sneaky conversation you have to have when you're evaluating transfer portal additions. You know, sometimes you're kind of forced into grabbing players that maybe don't necessarily fit what you want to do. Like you look at Beau Atkinson, what made Jack Sawyer, JTT, some of the better edge defenders in the country last year? Yes, they were both very good at getting after the passer. They were both bigger bodies with really heavy hands that were really, really good against the run. Beau Atkinson's that kind of edge defender as well. Starts with what he can do in the run game. A lot of length, a lot of power in the hands, can get off blocks, can make sure he's keeping his outside shoulder free. You can get after the passer too. But if you want to have an elite pass rush, like to me, it always starts with stopping the run on first and second down. Beau Atkinson can do that. And you look at the recipe for Ohio State last year, we're going to be damn good against the run on first and second down, force teams into those third and long passing situations. There wasn't really many offensive lines that could block Ohio State up in those situations. And you grab Beau Atkinson and you kind of get the feel that he really helps bring that same feel for this Ohio State defensive line going into the 2025 year. In my opinion, this is the benefit of being Ohio State and doing as well as you do on the high school recruiting trail, where you enter the transfer portal and you don't have 7-8 spots that you got to go out and address. You know, you really had one. It was on the defensive line, and it allows you to push your chips into the middle of the table, really identify the best players available to you in the portal, and go out and be aggressive and get them. And I think Beau Atkinson, this was exactly what I think Ohio State needed going into the 2025 year. Now, I think for a lot of Ohio State fans, now we got that edge position figured out. We probably want to grab one more body on the inside of the defensive line too. We're going to talk about a few options. Before we get into it, as always, the Ohio State fans, appreciate you guys. It's been a quiet spring portal window for Ohio State. I think they were focused on just a few select players that really could elevate this football team. It's exactly what they do. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. Without further ado, let's get into it. Now, I want to finish up our conversation on Beau Atkinson because I am a massive fan of this kid. And then we're going to kind of transition to, all right, what are some other names Ohio State could pursue? To me, it starts with what he does against the run, which is so underrated when you're talking about these edge defenders. Like everybody wants to talk about the pass rush metrics. And look, Beau Atkinson can get after the passer. Had 7.5 sacks last year. Like he's not a liability as a pass rusher, but to me, what stands out is how dominant he is against the run. Really good with block destruction, really good at holding the point of attack, really good at getting off blocks. He is a very big edge defender that takes a lot of pride in stopping the run. And then as a pass rusher, I think what's so unique about him is he's got a lot of different ways he can win. I think it starts with speed to power. At 6'6", 265, like I'm long, I'm really strong. I can just go right through offensive tackles and kind of put that tackle right into the lap of the quarterback. But he's got some sneaky twitch and some sneaky burst and bend for a guy that size. Like he can win with some speed on the outside shoulder of offensive tackles too. He's got a lot of ways to win, and he's a developed pass rusher. Like he's got a plan. You turn on the film, he knows what he's doing. If you're an Ohio State fan, you're trying to sell yourself on Beau Atkinson. Go turn on the Florida State film from last year. That was a highlight game for Beau Atkinson. He dominated pretty much every snap he was on the field for. Really good get at a position of need, and that's what you're looking for in the spring portal. Ohio State's not a program that's just going to go get players to get players. They don't need to. There's quite frankly not a lot of guys in the spring transfer portal window that would play and start for Ohio State because they recruit the high school ranks the way Ohio State does. Beau Atkinson was one of those guys that, number one, was, in my opinion, a phenomenal football player that translates to the Big Ten very well at a position that Ohio State wanted to address. This is huge for Ohio State. Kind of changes how you look at Ohio State going into 2025. Now, the other position I think a lot of Ohio State fans probably want to see addressed, like now you're feeling good about the edge, right? Kenyatta Jackson, Caden Curry, I've been very vocal, I think are very good football players. Maybe not massive names in the national media yet because they were kind of waiting their turn behind Jack Sawyer and JTT. And that's one thing to commend Ohio State for. Like really good job of roster retention. It was going to be hard to keep Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry on your football team when they had to sit behind guys like JTT and Jack Sawyer for, an extra year in 2024. They did a good job doing that. And so now you have a bunch of guys that maybe the national media hasn't heard of, but I'm sure the Ohio State fans who follow this team know, like you feel good about that position. Now you look at the interior defensive line, and it's kind of the same conversation. You probably want to land one more guy that you can trust, not only from a depth standpoint, but you're probably looking for a guy that can be a difference maker up front as well. Here's a name that I would be looking for if I'm an Ohio State fan. That's Akella Stone coming from Ole Miss. I think Akella Stone can play. And again, very similar to the conversation we had with a guy like Caden Curry or Jackson, where it's like not a ton of people know Akella Stone because he was sitting behind guys like Walter Nolan last year, kind of playing rotational snaps. This kid is really, really good. And I think what's uniquely putting Ohio State in a good spot here is transferring from Ole Miss. He can't go to the other SEC programs. You look at the other teams that are defensive line needy. They're mostly in the SEC, teams like Texas and Georgia, LSU. Akella Stone can't go there. And so I think it puts Ohio State in a uniquely good spot to go out and land one more body on the inside of that defensive line that I think can play at a high level. He's listed at 6'2", 285. He's got to be heavier than that, plays heavier than that, really good against the run, has some pass rush juice to him as well. This is a guy that could come in and start for Ohio State, but at the very least, would come in and give you 30 quality snaps a game as a rotational defensive lineman, which is important. Like, just go ask Ohio State fans, why were you playing your best football in the middle of January? It was because Ohio State was deep along the defensive line. Another name I would take a look at if I'm an Ohio State fan, Bernard Gooden from USF. Now, the tricky part here is, 6'1", 280. Like he ain't that big. Like you can go check the film. He is not the biggest interior defensive lineman. Go turn on the Alabama film. going up against guys like Tyler Bucker or a guy like Jaden Roberts, like big, nasty interior offensive linemen. Bernard Gooden did not get physically overwhelmed. And I'll say this, if you're not getting physically overwhelmed by a guy like Tyler Bucky, you're probably not getting overwhelmed by anybody in the country. Really, really good pass rusher. He's good against the run because he plays with good leverage and he can get off blocks. Elite pass rusher, 27 quarterback hurries at USF in the 2024 year. This is another body that I think would significantly elevate what Ohio State is on the defensive line. Look, in my opinion, I think Ohio State has just about every position checked. Yeah, coming out of the spring game, like I think a lot of Ohio State fans are saying, "Hey, our offensive line, we feel damn good about that unit." I think you came out of the spring game saying we feel really good about this roster. Besides the defensive line, and it's not like the defensive line is going to be bad for Ohio State in the 2025 year. The question was, can it be as good as it was in the 2024 year? You go out and get a guy like Beau Atkinson. You maybe go out and get a guy like a Kello Stone, Bernard Gooden, or maybe both. And you're sitting there saying we feel pretty good about the defensive line too. And now we're checking off all the boxes that we want to see checked going into 2025. Really big pickup for Beau Atkinson. Couple other names that I think are worth monitoring if you're an Ohio State fan. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.